of excellence in sports entertainment.
Everybody that's been put in front of me, I've destroyed.
Here we go!
I, for a number of years, was asked to become a professional wrestler because I was in Atlanta, I was with the Falcons, I was, you go back to the Georgia days. I mean,
WCW was
I rubbed shoulders with these guys for 20 years. It was never something I really took seriously. It's weird how I ended up in the business. I came up with a gimmick.
How do you stay true to yourself?
I'm me.
There is no character.
There is no character.
There's no shtick.
There really isn't. There's not. I mean, when I lower my voice and try to talk mean, well, yeah, I mean, that's the only shtick there is.
And look at Goldberg measuring Lesnar. Here comes Goldberg into the barricade.
Being a meathead, being a professional football player, being a guy who never wanted to do anything but play pro football and know that, here I am and I did what I did in the wrestling business. I'm so appreciative of it. I wasn't at the time as much as I am now, obviously.
What's your take on Goldberg?
Oh, Goldberg, I thought he was awesome. I thought he was great for WCW and for wrestling in general. Goldberg just brings a legitimacy into the ring. When he steps into that ring, there's gonna be legit shots, hits, moves. Nothing's gonna look questionable. It's all gonna look solid. And I saw an interview with him on YouTube before, and he was talking about that, how he prided himself on how his hits and moves were executed and how it looked. And you could tell when he got in there, it was like a prize fighter type atmosphere. And that's what I ultimately wanted for wrestling. I don't like the idea of wrestling being a traveling circus. I think the wrestlers, they're on the road 300 out of 365 days of the year. That's not a good thing. How could that ever be a good thing? And then their bodies are getting worn down, and now you have less opportunities to have those bigger moments because you're wasting the wrestlers in some non-televised match in some weird arena somewhere in the country. I just think that's a waste. I think every time they wrestle, it should be televised. And I think we should have bigger match feeling situations going into events. But I think, kind of like what happened with Hogan and Flair. WWF has Hogan and Flair in at the same time in the same company, and they don't go for it. They had them wrestle in arenas across the country to test out what people thought, and those matches usually just end in disqualifications or countouts. And it was just a test run. Like, why are we test running Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair, the match that people have been talking about throughout the 80s they wish would happen? And here we have an opportunity to make it happen, and he didn't do it.
At a WrestleMania.
At a WrestleMania 8, which would have been WrestleMania 8 is like one of the worst WrestleManias ever. And
it did have one of my top 20 matches on there. Ric Flair and Macho Man. That was a masterpiece too.
Yeah, but again, the key word is Ric Flair. And we could have had that with, I think that the Ric Flair and Hogan match could have gone down a little bit like how Ric Flair and Lex Luger's matches go down. I think those, I don't know if Hogan is capable, because Luger gets bashed because they're like, oh, well, he wasn't able to do this, he wasn't able to do that. But if you go back and you look at those matches, the matches he had with Ric Flair, people will say, oh, well, because it's Ric Flair. But that's not true. Lex Luger's had many, many great matches with other opponents. Just that
against who?
Huh?
Against who?
He had one with me, Marcellus, Undertaker, at the Great American Bash 90. He had, huh? Oh, come on. What do you mean? Him and Nikita Koloff. Lex Luger, Dusty Rhodes.
The story carried Nikita and Luger. Dusty and Luger in that cage. I agree.
Yeah, and then Luger had that match with I think it was Hulk Hogan when he won on Nitro. That was a big moment. But that was a big moment in Detroit when he won the championship.
Terrible. And then he lost it again in 8 days. That was terrible.
Well, that's a Hulk Hogan influence right there, right? Let's let the title go so it can have an exciting moment, but I need the title right back. You know, that's the kind of mentality you're dealing with. But I like the match. I remember that like it was yesterday. That night, the match was good, and the moment was a big moment too. Not as big as obviously like Goldberg beating Hogan or Sting beating Hogan, but it was still a good match, still a good moment. But Flair's matches against Luger at Starcade 88, Great American Bash 88, Wrestle War 90, Wild Thing. Those matches, even Capital Combat 90, those matches were really great. They all told a story. You have a big, strong, younger opponent, Luger, against the old veteran, Ric Flair. You figure, how is this shorter guy going to beat this muscle-bound guy? And again, Flair working on his leg, even though he would get dominated early in the match and maybe sometimes in the middle, Flair would work his way in, start to attack the knee, do subtle moves here and there. And then at the end of the match in Starcade 88, when Luger got on a run and then he's going for the torture rack, he picks up Flair, he starts putting him in the torture rack, but then his knee buckled from all the hits and shots that he's been taking throughout the match. And that's a great story. That was a great ending. Flair got the 1, 2, 3. And I think some situation like that could have happened with Hogan and Flair, but again, we're dealing with Hulk Hogan, so he probably would have pushed back. He probably would have, he has an ego, so he can't take one for the team. He can't do the right thing. But it would have been great. It would have been great to see it at WrestleMania. That would have been great.
I'm trying to think of, and to me, Ric Flair's top 5 the greatest ever.
I started to think about that differently now.
Well, hold on, because we got to get to a list. Me and you're gonna have to do a top 5 list, but I'm trying to remember a Hulk Hogan match that, because everybody automatically goes to WrestleMania 18 Rock Hogan. If you listen to that, if you watch that match with the sound off, it's the worst piece of shit in the world. The crowd.
You're right. You're probably right there.
I'm trying to think of a Hulk Hogan match that I can go back to and be like, boy, that was tremendous. And the only one that comes to my mind is Hogan Warrior.
Right.
I think Hogan Warrior is one of the great all-time wrestling matches.
No, I wouldn't say that. If you watch that match, you're gonna notice there's a lot of holding. There's a lot I have you in the sleeper. Okay, now I have you in the sleeper. Oh, I have you in a backbreaker. Oh, I have you in the backbreaker. It's like a lot of resting going on, and it's not. A great wrestling match would be like, it's a tag team match, but probably the greatest tag team match is gonna be Sting and Lex Luger versus the Steiner Brothers, Super Bowl 91.
The Koloff came and clotheslined Luger with the chain. Come on, man. Yes. Because you watch that match, there's a lot of give and take. Steiner Brothers getting their moves off. The crowd just going crazy. It's just a lot of back and forth. One thing happened, then another thing happened, and then it just goes into a series of events. And in 91, none of that was happening. I never seen a match like that, especially a tag team match. It was great. It showcased, it showcased the strength of everybody involved. Everybody had a moment to shine. Everybody contributed, and it's just I think it's my favorite tag team match ever. There's some great tag team matches that have happened over the years. A lot of story-driven ones that have a lot of drama to it, where you got a guy that's been beat down the whole match, and then he finally gets the tag, and the guy comes, and
I get all that, but the Sting and Luger versus the Steiner Brothers, a lot of high impact moves, a lot of grounding, pounding. It's just amazing, just amazing.
Man, you know what? Having this conversation, because God, we got to move on. But having this conversation is really making me realize why I could never really walk away. Like I say, I stopped watching when the Chris Benoit thing happened for about 4 to 5 years, and then
Were
I
you
got
mad
sucked
at Chris
back.
Benoit? Were you mad at Chris Benoit? Or you mad at
No,
wrestling?
we'll get there. I just thought that it was. I just thought it was such a stain on wrestling. I just didn't want to be involved with it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But even recently, I haven't consistently watched. I haven't watched the WWE. I don't watch AEW, and I don't watch anything else. No. We'll get to that too. But
yeah,
I haven't consistently watched the WWE product in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I just thought it was just ridiculous and everything like that. But they have found a way to draw me back in. It's like every time something draws me back in, and having this conversation lets me know, like, damn, I really love wrestling, and there's nothing wrong with loving it. Like I love them. I love the Miami Dolphins. I really, really love wrestling, and I love the fact that it's getting back really good. So, all right, let's move along in the timeline. So WCW has Goldberg, and they're on fire. Everything's going good, and then in true WCW fashion, they beat the guy with a cattle prod. Explain. Come on, man. Because me and you weren't in contact then. Explain that one.
Wait a minute. They beat the guy with a cattle what?
A cattle prod. Starcade. What was it?
Oh, you mean the oh, okay, the shocking
that shocked him in his chest.
I to be honest, I don't think that was so bad. To be honest, a lot of people are like, oh my God, how can you do that? You got your golden goose, Goldberg. He's undefeated. You should have kept that going for another year at least. And I'm like, really? This guy should lose. I mean, if he doesn't lose at some, because he was like 155 and 0 or 200 and I don't know what it was, but it's ridiculous. At a certain point, now that becomes so. Like, why am I watching a Goldberg match? He's just gonna win, right?
So they finally beat Goldberg, and he loses to the head booker, and then he loses in that, ridiculous way, only for one of the worst moments in WCW history to happen.
Oh yeah. So, the laying down thing. Oh my God.
That leads Fingerpoke of Doom.
Oh my God. We're just laying down in the middle of yeah, that
and again, it's hard.
Right. All these tremendously bad moments are all centered around Hulk Hogan, whether it's in the WWF or the WCW. It's always the common denominator, which is Hulk Hogan. It's frustrating, man. It's frustrating because it could be so much more, But his ego and his narcissism about how he can't lose, and if he does lose, we have to go through hoops to make it look like they had to send the military to beat Hulk Hogan. Like, it's just not that serious. Just have the guy win. Goldberg need to lose. I mean, him winning all that time, I mean, it had to happen, and no better place than Starcade, the biggest event of WCW calendar year, going up against a legitimate threat, which is Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash, anybody could see, well, that guy could beat a Goldberg. Yeah. So why not have him just legitimately win in the middle of the ring, But they're always doing some stunt, and that really stops wrestling from being more than what it could be, because we want to suspend the disbelief, and just enjoy it.
So. And that started the steady decline of WCW. So,
but I don't think so, though. I think that narrative by Vince McMahon and WWF people, where they put out these DVDs and they're just saying that same nonsense. And I was watching WCW back then. I don't think any of those things is like making anybody say, I'm not going to watch it. What destroyed WCW was people that purchased Time Warner, Turner, the people that purchased that, AOL, they are the ones that said, we don't like this thing called wrestling. It's dirty, it's gross, it's obscene. We want to get rid of it. And that's what ultimately did it. It wasn't the ratings. I mean, the ratings may have dipped a little, but it's supposed to dip. Look at the NBA. Michael Jordan years, Magic Larry Bird years, now LeBron years. There's always been a dip. There's always going to be a dip. You can look in the NFL. There's always going to be a rise. There's always going to be a dip. But at the end of the day, you're still going to have your fans. You're still going to have to do your product. But it was those executives that purchased the company that decided we don't want this in our family of media, and that's ultimately what it was. It wasn't Vince McMahon, because even Vince McMahon said, I bought WCW for peanuts. That lets you know how they just wanted to get rid of it, you know?
Well, so I feel like Hulk Hogan is at the center of all these moves. So
everything.
There's another time in particular, ironically, Bash at the Beach.
Yes.
Hulk Hogan versus Jeff Jarrett. I want to say that was 2001.
No, 2000. Bash at the Beach, 2000.
Hulk Hogan gets the bright idea. Hey, I want to pull my creative control card, and I need the belt back. And Jeff Jarrett proceeds to come into the ring, lays down so Hogan can pin him. And Vince Russo cuts one of the most scathing promos on Hulk Hogan and to this day we don't really know if it was a work or a shoot, because some camps say that Hogan sued them. Russo will say sometimes that it was a work shoot, so that he knew it was gonna happen. He just didn't know what he was gonna say. So we never know. But again, Hulk Hogan seems to be, man, I'm starting to think maybe Hulk Hogan wasn't such a good guy that I thought he was.
No, he's not. He's a piece of trash. And only a coward wears yellow.
So here it is. March 26, 2001. A day that nobody ever thought, ever thought would happen. When I heard the rumors, I was like, "You get out of here." I'm like, okay, they're finally going to cross promote, kind of open that forbidden door thing. March 26, 2001, Monday Night Raw and Nitro are simulcast. And we find out that Vince McMahon has bought his competition. What was going on? What was going on in your mind? Because I really wanted to be next to you when this happened.
When it happened, at first I was like, oh my God, no way in hell. I was like, this is so horrible. But after about maybe a few weeks, I started thinking, I'm like, well, hold on. If it's under one roof, all these match situations we had been dreaming about having, Undertaker versus Sting, all these
Goldberg,
Goldberg and Aston, The Rock and Sting. I mean, there's so many situations that never happened that we could possibly now be getting. So then once I started seeing that, and then, they slowly started to integrate wrestlers into WWE. But I didn't know at the time that, the contracts with WCW wrestlers, they would take a pay cut to come into WWF. They would lose money. So a lot of them, like Goldberg, stayed home, rightfully so, healed their body, because they had been on the road all these years and decades. So they were able to heal their body while getting paid. So that's why that year, that first year, 2001, it took so long for them to even get into an angle. I mean, WCW and WWE was merged earlier in the year, and then they went right into WrestleMania. After that, you didn't hear anything really about it, and until like towards the ending of the year when they did that Invasion pay-per-view, and they had ECW come in and be a part of the Invasion, but they just couldn't do a proper Invasion because they just didn't have the big names. They didn't have the Stings, the Lugers. They didn't have those people in there to be able to do it. So slowly, you would see going into 2002, that's when things started to pick up for WWE because now Rey Mysterio popped up on SmackDown. Yeah, you had well, DDP showed up earlier, but then he got hit. He got hurt. He was going to do an angle with Undertaker, but yeah, that ended his career right there, pretty much. And then, but you had these guys started showing up slowly, and then things just started getting better. Now you had Chris Benoit, you had Kurt Angle, you had Eddie Guerrero, you had Brock Lesnar, you had Goldberg. So they were now becoming what NWA, WCW was like in the late '80s, where they had all the great talent was like right there. The entertaining guys with the legit hard-hitting guys. And if you look back at the 2002, 2003, WWE had some of the better pay-per-views. I would say from 2002 to 2005, they had a great run where you got like dream matches, Shawn Michaels versus Hulk Hogan. You had all these interesting things, The Rock versus Goldberg. You had really good lineups of matches and events. But that was because of that, of them getting the talent in there. But then that's kind of dissipated, and slowly it just started going down again.
I think, yeah, years later we heard about the contracts because again, when you're that young, you really don't know the inner workings of things. I think the Invasion angle could have been like the greatest piece of business ever, but
yeah, I thought that's what it was gonna be. Yeah.
In true Vince McMahon fashion, he messed it up. He couldn't get out of his own way. He couldn't allow. The rumor was that he was going to give WCW Monday Night Raw, and WWF was going to take SmackDown, and they act as two different shows, and they just meet up every now and then. But what
that's
did
what
it was
we were
that,
hoping. That's what we were hoping for.
What did it was that T Buff Bagwell match. And in Washington, how it stunk to join up, and then that's when Vince pulled the plug on everything. But I think I think Vince is a victim of his own self sometimes, where he can I wish we could put a dollar amount on the amount of money that he has left on the table,
right?
By just doing
ego,
stupidness, man.
Yep, yeah. Ego. Yep. I agree. 100%. You know what? In those days, like especially like 2002 time period, where I'm like, oh man, wrestling could be like NFL or NBA, where you'll have the league name would be WWE, and then it would be broken down into divisions. So your WCW could be like the Western Conference. In WWF could be like the Eastern Conference. And instead of, because they seem to take the route of the show being the organization rather than the organization being the show. And I don't like that. I don't like, oh, I'm a SmackDown guy, I'm a Raw guy. No, they should have kept the name. They should have kept the name and just kept the brand and kept it going. Why not? Why not have a bigger, wider league? But so many limitations.
What surprises me a lot is the fact that you actually stayed watching, because that's been the biggest criticism, that once WCW folded, they lost all those fans. But to know how big a WCW fan you are, and you came over to give it a chance is very telling, because I didn't know that. I was wondering if you watched it, but I didn't know for sure.
Yeah, I have the DVDs still to this day. I was buying the DVDs. I was watching it. I was hoping that, you know, they were building to something bigger and not just, oh no, it's going to be the same limited roster. It's just that we're going to delete these guys and bring in these guys. I didn't want that. If you had 100 guys, I wanted 400 guys now, and then split it into different areas. And now it'll be under that umbrella of WWE. Starcade should have still happened. WrestleMania should have still happened, but I knew he wasn't going to let Starcade live because Starcade is the original granddaddy pay-per-view. You can't make WrestleMania be special with Starcade still breathing.
He doesn't even use the name. Well, NXT uses the names like Great American Bash and stuff. He didn't for years use the names.
Yeah.
Halloween Havoc and stuff. He would never use those names. I think this guy's afraid of money. Like, to be a billionaire,
yep,
he's really afraid of money. So before I go, because man, we've been going real long, but I want to get into this real quick before I get into Mr. Benoit. What's your top 5 all-time favorite wrestler list?
Oh, my favorites would be Sting, Vader, Big Van Vader, Sid Vicious. I would say Too Cold Scorpio, and the last one, I would say Ric Flair, but I'm like wavering on Ric Flair lately now. There's a lot of things about Ric Flair I don't like anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
That list shocks the hell out of me.
Well, because Teddy Long, for one, Ric Flair called him the N-word backstage a few times. That's what Teddy Long said. And and then there was Ole
Anderson.
Ole Anderson too. Ole was flying the words like crazy, but Ric Flair also did it a few times to Teddy Long as well. And then the other thing, it was some kind of dispute with 2 wrestlers, and I think one of them was a white wrestler and a black wrestler. I think it was Andre or somebody in Bad News Brown, something like that. And just the way Ric Flair was kind of dismissive of the black wrestler. I didn't like that way he came off in that interview. And then, you know, plus he's real petty. I don't know if you know about the recent podcast dispute he had with Mark Madden. Just out of the blue, he just fired the guy on Twitter. I mean, just fired the guy.
He's made some choices lately that I don't really care for. So give me that list again.
So shocking. I would say Vader, Big Van Vader, Sid Vicious, Sting, Too Cold Scorpio, and it used to be Ric Flair, but I'll probably have to look for somebody else. Maybe I'll go Big Papa Pump or something like that.
Wow. On a top 5 list? Hey, listen.
That's for my favorite. That's for my favorite. I mean,
to each of his own. Everybody has their own top 5. I am shocked because nobody on that list you said is great, but nobody on that list would crack my top 20. Well, with the exception, the Sting Invader. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Sting Invader. So my top 5. So you want to go number 5? I got to put him in there. Hulk Hogan.
Oh my God!
Just because of what he's done. Because if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, I wouldn't be a wrestling fan. And I remember when I first saw Hulk Hogan as a 20-year-old man, I was like, saw him in person. I mean, I was starstruck, which is crazy. But so Hulk Hogan would be number 5. Number 4, I gotta put Shawn Michaels.
Oh my God, he is trash. No, I shouldn't say that. No, I'll take it back. He isn't trash. He's good. He's a decent wrestler. He can work in the ring, but I think that he was pushed to be more than what he really is. In his run in WWF 96 up, he really didn't do anything. He wasn't really, and that was like their worst years, to be honest. So But Shawn Michaels, when he came back in 2002 from his injury,
Yeah.
that was his time to make his legacy, and he did. He was in some great matches. He performed well. But the problem with Shawn Michaels is those kind of words were used before then. And I don't think what I seen in the 90s from him, very talented wrestler, good, decent, but that's about it. I don't think he stood out or he was the best. I think he got to that level partially, but after the injury and when he came back in 2002, because he got some real matchups like with Kurt Angle and
Jericho.
Chris Jericho. I also like the John Cena match. I think John Cena, I don't know if so much like John Cena, but he has had some really good matches with Brock Lesnar too. He's told some really good stories. He's had some moments that are interesting. He's an interesting career, but I don't like him still. But still, I have to give him credit, more credit than Hogan. Oh my God!
So I got Hogan. I got Hogan at 5. I got I got Shawn Michaels at 4.
Yep.
At number 3. Okay, so here's the deal.
If I don't have Macho Man, we moving some furniture.
At number 3, so number 3 would be a tie with Macho Man holding 3A and Ric Flair at 3B. Now,
Okay.
so here's the thing. I think Ric Flair is the greatest professional wrestler of all time.
I don't think so.
I can't put him at the top of my list. Number 2 for me is the Phenom, the Undertaker.
Okay.
Just outright my completely favorite. And my favorite wrestler of all time is going to be shocking as hell, but it's the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Oh yeah, Dusty. Oh, I want to make a correction. So I'm going to take Flair out and put Goldberg in.
Oh man! Hey, listen, you can't be a real NWA fan and not have Ric Flair.
I'm just getting tired of Flair. Like it just happened like a few weeks ago. I just started thinking about it, and then like Bret Hart had a shoot interview, and he brought up some great points. He's like, when you look at how can Ric Flair be really considered the greatest when if you look at his match, he does the same stuff over and over. Run to the turnbuckle, flip over, go up the top, then somebody hits him down on the ground. Somebody will come after him, and then he'll go down on his knees and beg. It's all the same steps that he takes in every match he has. Whereas, other wrestlers, they mix it up. You see different things out of them, but not Flair. Not Flair. Flair and Hogan have a set pattern of movement, and that is it. Flair was a little bit more open in his younger days, like I would say like the mid to late 80s. He was a little bit more open, and he would do a little bit more different. But like somewhere in between the late 90s and the 2000s, he just so repetitive. How could that be the greatest? The only reason he can be really like considered like the greatest is because of what he did with the NWA title. He held that title for that period of time. He always wrestled the long matches, the brutal matches. He was in cage matches. He bled night after night, did 60 minutes. That's why people push him as number 1, and plus he's so known and quotable. But when you dissect that in-ring action, I mean, Bret the Hitman Hart, as much as it pains me, Hitman is technically way better than Flair.
All right, so okay, so here we are, because somebody's going to love that you said that. Because the nature of the show, and you guys could hear that we touched a nerve here, because like we literally could just talk about this forever. But I want to wrap up soon. Will you come back? Okay, so I need a favor from you. Will you come back that we could do another show where we talk about the guys that we didn't put on the list? Because people are going to listen to us and be like, wait a minute, no Bret Hart, no Shawn, no Rock, no Austin, and I think we should do that just because, you like who you like. So no Chris Jericho, stuff like that. So
yeah, plus there's a difference between who you like and who you think are the best as far as like influence and the legacies. So the list will be
So
completely different. Like Sid Vicious isn't gonna make a list like that. He's
so
just my favorite.
we we need to do this again because I have somebody that who Bret Hart is his favorite wrestler of all time. So he'd love to be in on that conversation and tell us why Bret Hart is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But so I wanna move on to a more dreary part of the show.
Some disturbing new details tonight in the apparent double murder-suicide at pro wrestler Chris Benoit's Georgia home. Cops saying in a press conference just a couple of hours ago that they found the wrestler hanging by a pulley on some exercise equipment in his home gym. And they also found Bibles placed beside the bodies of his wife and his 7-year-old son. They were apparently killed in separate rooms. There were prescription steroids also found in the home. The toxicology results, they're not going to be back for a few weeks, so we don't actually know the connection there yet, but a lot of people looking at those steroids.
What was it? June 27th. Okay, so from June 22nd to June 24th of 2007, the world was hit with the news that Chris Benoit and his whole family at the time were killed, which is all we knew until details unfolded, and then we realized what a monster he was. So, because you wanted to bring him up, what was your thought? And this is what made me stop watching, because I was like, you know what, this is just an ugly black eye on the industry. Let me just stop watching for 4 to 5 years. And I don't think I came back until CM Punk's pipe bomb. I think legit that's when I came back. So, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, my initial thoughts was, oh, this is horrendous. This is horrible. I can't believe this is actually going on. There's a bit of like, oh my God, there's a stigma where this is expected of wrestlers and the industry. And is it bad to even be a viewer of this? But over time, because the narrative with WWE especially is let's place all the blame on that guy to distance ourselves from that and protect the business and the industry. And over time, I have heard and I've seen and read different perspectives, especially from the Benoit family, watching documentaries, seeing them speaking on it, seeing friends and others speak on it. There's some wrestlers like Chris Jericho who just say Chris Benoit's a monster and this and that and whatnot.
I mean, that was what made it so horrible is nobody saw it coming. Chris was a great guy, and he was an honorable guy. Like if I had to leave my kids with somebody for the weekend on an emergency, I would have no problems leaving them with Chris. So to this day, we still don't know why, and you'll never know why.
There was the brain damage thing that a lot of people were pushing.
But still, I understand that. And listen, to kill his wife is beyond comprehension, but killing your own son, that to me is the one where it gets to me. So that's the, and like I said, that's the unforgivable portion of the whole story to me. And
I just feel like when people are mentally so ill, they have these notions of I'm taking him with me, sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess.
That's one of the theories that people put forward for when people do that.
Yeah, once again, like I said, we can analyze it till the cows come home.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, I don't know what happened. We'll never know, and it's a terrible tragedy because at the end of the day, Chris was a great friend of mine, and he was a great family man as well.
3 people died in that house that night. 3, I don't care about CTE. 3 people died in that house that night. Only one person had the choice behind it. The other 2 didn't have a choice to die. So if that's your boy, fuck you. As a performer, amongst the 5 greatest I've ever seen in my entire life. As a talent, remarkable. As a human being, I don't care about CTE. I don't care what the reasons are. Nancy and Daniel had no option. He did. Fuck him.
Who knows, and whether or not there were other aspects involved in his life that had something to do with this behavior. Hopefully we can find out in some way. This has been so devastating as a father and a grandfather and a father figure to all those associated with our brand. This is not what we're about. What we're about is putting smiles on people's faces. This is the opposite of what we do. We're entertainers. We entertain people all over the world, and we put smiles on faces. That's our job description, not something like this to be tainted and smeared with this. It's no different than if you're a postal worker. You still use the post office, but obviously there's been problems there too. There are problems everywhere. There was no indication whatsoever that this man could possibly turn into this monster and do what he did. And again, we want to know the answers just like everyone else. Steroids may or may not had something to do with this. Other prescription drugs, other pressures in terms of his son and his wife. I don't know, and some of this perhaps we'll never know. But hopefully we can put it to bed as best we possibly can.
Let's really think about what it is. And I started thinking about this a few years back, and I'm like, okay, so he's had head trauma. Now, a lot of people say they don't care because he plotted this and he did that and all this. But at the end of the day, if you have head trauma, if you're not all the way right in your head, that's going to lead to something that's uncharacteristic of yourself. Because before this happened, you asked about Chris Benoit, he's going to be an exemplified person. People are always going to always say things complimentary about him and how much of a great guy he is. But after this happened, it was like he was a devil himself. But he's been having this head and concussion and all these issues mentally due to one of his finishing moves is a headbutt off the top rope. And he's been doing that over 10, 15, 20 years. And that impact over time, I mean, they said with the autopsy that, his brain, it wasn't normal. The size of it, the look of it, it wasn't normal. So can that influence an action of a person, make you feel for a lot of people these days? But back then he's going through his stuff, and on a different level, as he had to take drugs to painkillers to reduce the pain in his body that he was experiencing working that hectic 300 a year night schedule that he's had. So but Chris Benoit did a heinous, dastardly crime. But I never like to just keep it there. Like, everybody looks at the guy that went into the store to hole up and he shot somebody. But what were the actions that led that person to that lifestyle, to that moment? Did we see that person wasn't taken care of as a kid? That person was brought up in a more negative situation. So what do we expect the outcome to be? So the same thing I am looking at with Chris Benoit. He did this crime, but what happened in his life? We know about the concussions, we know about the head trauma and the injuries, and will that take any kind of action or role in what he did? Some people say no, but again, I feel like it has to do with the mind, and if that's not right, I could see how that could end up being that way. Maybe he felt a certain way, but because of his condition of his brain, it just made him go over the top, making him feel like even though this is wild and he's mad, it made him act on it because he's just not right mentally. So I don't think it's fair how the wrestling world just dumps on Chris Benoit. It took a lot of years for me to start thinking like that, because from the very beginning, Vince McMahon was like, oh, he's a monster, or this and that. And they just really just didn't even leave anything open for Chris Benoit. Like, there was none of his side. There was none of anything. There was just, he's bad, he's trash. And I don't think that's fair. Chris Benoit, again, deleting his matches, not showing it, blurring his face out in certain DVDs and whatnot. I don't think that's cool at all, because he still did what he did. He did some great matches, and like now we're trying to erase him from history, which that don't make no sense. We don't even do that to Hitler.
Well, the wrestling world in shock today. Former champion Chris Benoit found dead in his Atlanta home along with his wife and young son. Police now treating the discovery as a double murder-suicide. World Wrestling Entertainment says Benoit failed to show for 2 live events over the weekend, and apparently at least one suspicious text message sent to friends prompted wrestling officials to send police to his house.
Good evening. Tonight, this arena here in Corpus Christi, Texas, was to have been filled to capacity with enthusiastic WWE fans. Tonight's storyline was to have been the alleged demise of my character, Mr. McMahon. However, in reality, WWE superstar Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel are dead. Their bodies were discovered this afternoon in their new suburban Atlanta home. The authorities are undergoing an investigation. We here in the WWE can only offer our condolences to the extended family of Chris Benoit. And the only other thing we can do at this moment is tonight pay tribute to Chris Benoit. We'll offer you some of the most memorable moments in Chris's professional life. And you'll hear tonight comments from his peers, those here, his fellow performers, those here who loved Chris and admired him so much. So tonight will be a 3-hour tribute to one of the greatest WWE superstars of all time. Tonight will be a tribute to Chris Benoit. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Last night on Monday Night Raw, the WWE presented a special tribute show recognizing the career of Chris Benoit. However, now some 26 hours later, the facts of this horrific tragedy are now apparent. Therefore, other than my comments, there will be no mention of Mr. Benoit's name tonight. On the contrary, tonight's show will be dedicated to everyone who has been affected by this terrible incident. This evening marks the first step of the healing process. Tonight, WWE performers will do what they do better than anyone else in the world: entertain you.
First at 6, the brain of the man accused of killing 5 people, including 2 children, will be tested for CTE.
Philip Adams, who had several concussions in his short NFL career, will have his brain tested at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. Deputies say Adams shot and killed 4 members of the Leslie family Wednesday night, and among them 9-year-old Ada Leslie, 5-year-old Noah Leslie, who are being remembered for their kind and caring spirits. James Lewis was also killed while working at the Leslie home, and tonight it's still not clear why all of this happened.
No answer at the home where former NFL player Philip Adams took his life.
I don't know what could happen to somebody to make them do that.
Next door, Dwayne Ballou is still in shock. He's known Adams for more than 30 years.
I feel bad, talking about how good a kid Philip was when you got 5 people murdered down the road. But the truth is, this young man, he was just a good guy.
I heard the popping, but I didn't realize it was shooting until I saw this guy laying on the ground.
Investigators are still trying to learn why Adams gunned down prominent Dr. Robert Leslie, his wife Barbara, and their 2 young grandkids, aged 5 and 9. Ballou spoke with Adams' father.
We were just talking about how terrible it was, and and he was upset about Dr. Leslie's family, then his own son. It was a lot. There wasn't much he could say.
2 repairmen working at Leslie's home were also shot. One was killed. The lone survivor, Robert Shook, is listed as very critical. A family member writing on Facebook that he was shot at least 6 times, saying only God can work this miracle. Only God will ever know what triggered this to happen. Investigators have no evidence that Adams was a patient of Dr. Leslie. Retired FBI Special Agent Joseph Lewis of Charlotte says that will be a main focus of this investigation, along with any brain injuries Adams may have suffered playing football.
Based on your professional experience, how likely is it that this was a totally random case?
It's probably very unlikely. Those things do not happen, particularly on the spur of the moment.
What does it tell you about someone who would snap like this?
I would suspect that he had some mental issues.
Adam's sister spoke with USA Today and told the paper, quote, that her brother's mental health degraded fast and terribly bad, and that he was going through a disability claim with the NFL.
On New at Noon, brain test results conducted on a former NFL player who killed 6 people in South Carolina reveal he had what's called CTE in the frontal lobe of his brain. Philip Adams' family agreed to have his brain tested for the degenerative brain disease caused by repeated head trauma and concussions. He died by suicide after his deadly rampage. Adams spent 5 years in the NFL, ending his career with the Atlanta Falcons after the 2015 season.
CTE has been associated with repetitive head impacts, that is, repetitive concussion and subconcussive injury in contact sport athletes, but also in military veterans. With repeated impacts to the head, the brain inside the skull ricochets back and forth. It goes forward, accelerates and decelerates, but it also goes rotationally. And that causes the brain inside the skull to actually elongate and stretch. And that stretching puts a lot of physical force on the individual nerve cells, especially the neurons and the axons. And that can lead to the buildup of tau. Tau is a normal protein in the brain, and normally it's inside the nerve cell, and it contributes to what we call the cytoskeleton, or the skeleton of the cell. It helps hold up the cell shape. Under abnormal circumstances, like after trauma, when the nerve cells are damaged, the tau actually comes off off the skeleton. It comes off the microtubules and it starts clumping up, and eventually it'll kill the cell if enough builds up over time. An individual in his 40s, this is a former NFL player who is a person of large stature. You can see that the ventricles, the areas of the brain that contain spinal fluid, they're enlarged. This thinning gets to be damaged more than the ventral aspect. And that's something we've really only seen in CTE. We can see spaces near the hippocampus, which is a part of the brain that's important for learning and for memory. And we can see that there's been shrinkage there as well. To see this in such a young individual is quite startling. We see a lot of CTE lesions on the top and the lateral sides of the frontal lobes, which is about 2/3 of the forward part of the brain. That's what leads to the symptoms and signs of CTE. Loss of memory, some behavioral and personality change, and often mood changes like depression.
Dr. Phil Aston, a physician who was accused of illegally prescribing painkillers and other drugs to many patients, including pro wrestler Chris Benoit, has received a 10-year prison sentence. Prosecutors said at least 2 of Aston's patients died following a drug overdose.
So, yeah, that's my point of view on it. I don't know what you think.
I respect that point of view, but I will say this. Me personally, I think that he is a monster because we all have trauma in life, and I want you to hear what I say. Not everybody doesn't have head trauma and things like that, but we all deal with some type of trauma. I've had thoughts of suicide plenty of times, but never did I think, you know what? Let me kill my wife and my 7 or 8 year old son in the process. I think that I do agree with one thing. I don't think they should have wiped him, erased him out of history, because it's there. We know, we saw it. We saw the WrestleMania 20. We cried at the WrestleMania 20. We were happy for him at WrestleMania 20. But that's the wrestling side of him. See, I can separate the two. the wrestler Chris Benoit, I think, is one of the greatest ever.
Yep.
But Chris Benoit, the man, to me, is a monster. And that's what supersedes everything that he'll do. His wrestling career means nothing to me because of that one act that he did. And that's why I stand with it. And I agree, man. Sometimes, I mean, a lot of times we don't have enough grace for people, but in this instance, I can't have grace for a man that kills his wife and his son. I mean, you and in the way he did it is one thing if it was an act of rage and he shot him, boom, or he stabbed him, boom. He put his wife, he put his son in the crippler crossface.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what has to be going through your mind as your 7-year-old is in your wrestling move, probably screaming and begging for his life. So to me, he is a monster, and if there is a hell, I hope that he's burning in there, because people like that deserve to be burned up good.
See, but that's the thing, though. That's the thing that screams to me that if he was in his right mind, that wouldn't have happened. I don't feel like if he was not a wrestler or if he had retired earlier or whatever, to where his condition, because it has to be. I don't think that I'm Chris Benoit and I'm going to kill people like that. I don't think that would have happened if his brain damage wasn't there. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. But it just seems odd that a guy that's been showing for decades to be a certain way, to then his health goes south, his mental health and everything else goes south, and then he acts that way. I don't think that would have happened had he had not been that way. And he was also shooting up, because he was doing steroids, and he had all kinds of things going, prescription painkiller drugs. He had a lot going on. I'm not saying, oh God, we need to feel sorry for him and all that stuff, but I just think that it's like heavy hate on Chris Benoit, heavier than the hate that Vince McMahon got for killing pretty much Owen Hart, where you put him in a situation that didn't even need to be, because Sting is coming out the rafters. We need to make this guy come out the rafters as well so that we can have our own spectacle. I think a guy with brain trauma and issues like that, committing an act like that with one, do we feel like that would be a surprise? Would a guy that is not right in the head do something that a person that's not right in the head would do? And I think that's the unfortunate thing that happened to Benoit. I don't think a Benoit that didn't have this issue would have done that. But I think the narrative is whether he has it or not, he would have done it. And I don't agree with that. I just don't feel like that is what would happen.
Well, I mean, again, I really push look at things a little different, but I think what this show is showing me is that me and you probably gonna have to do a wrestling segment at least once a month or something, because I had no idea that this thing was gonna go this long. So we're gonna wrap up soon, but let's get back to the subject at hand. So on July 25th, reports came out that a cold day in hell finally happened. Everybody to a man has said that Vince McMahon would die in his chair before he ever gave up control of the WWE. July 25th, 2022, word comes out, Vince McMahon has retired from the WWE, and he has given up all creative control, all everyday running. He's not the chairman anymore. He has completely turned everything over. But it's not without controversy. It's because of who was it? I forget the source, but
Chris Hemme?
Well, I don't know. So I'm not going to say anybody's names because I don't know any names. But right now, to date, it's up to $20 million of misappropriated funds to cover up unusual activity, is what they're calling it. I mean, we all could read between the lines. He was having sex with a bunch of his workers, his employees.
So the money wasn't there for healthcare for the wrestlers, but it was there for this kind of stuff.
Well, but again now, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because you're the know where I feel like you're going to tie in a certain affiliation that he has with a certain former president kind of into this. So, we only got a couple of minutes left, but let's talk about this. Well, you just give me your thoughts, because I'm gonna tell you like this. My immediate thoughts, it doesn't surprise me. A billionaire running a multi-billion-dollar company. I'm shocked.
Thinking he's God.
I'm shocked. Remember he beat God. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that it took so long for something like this to actually come out.
Right.
So what's your thoughts on it? And we only have a couple of minutes, but what's your thoughts on it?
I think that Vince McMahon's a scumbucket. I think that he's straight trash. And I think that he just showed what he had been doing all his career. So that's how he approached the women that he was dealing with. But then, he would also do underhanded tactics in the wrestling world, where Starcade, which usually always happened on Thanksgiving night, for some reason in 1987, Starcade had to be during Christmas time, because Vince McMahon said to the cable companies, if you don't ban Starcade on Thanksgiving, then I'm not going to allow you to get the WrestleMania pay-per-view. So he just did like these shady tactics to stop his competition from executing what they needed to do. There's even rumors about him renting the building for a WCW event earlier in the day and letting the matches run longer just to disrupt the event that would happen later on in the night. These are the shady tactics, the business tactics of McMahon. And with a guy so power drunk and his head up his own tail, he feels he could do anything. He feels he's untouchable. He feels like he is God. And when you feel that way, you are brazen enough to push these scenarios. And if it's something that happens that you don't like, you can always have the money to wish it away. But I'm happy he got caught. I'm happy that the people spoke up. And I saw on YouTube one of the ladies that has an allegation against him. This old video from the mid '90s where a lady was talking about how it happened and what happened. And it's funny, that happened back then and we didn't pay attention to it. And now look where we're at now.
So I want to make everybody aware, though, no woman has come forward and accused him of anything.
On that video, they did.
He took my hand and he kept putting my hand on his penis. He started telling me that he knew I didn't have a job. I had left Frito-Lay because of him. He knew that I had a daughter and that he could either make me or break me. The choice was mine. And he made me have oral sex with. And he started to get really excited. And I pulled away. And he got really angry and said that it was worth $500,000 a year. And when I said no, he said that I'd better satisfy him. And he started pulling my pants off. And he pulled me on top of him. And he satisfied himself through intercourse.
Afterwards, Rita Marie said she worked for the WWF only 3 or 4 more times.
On that video.
But what I'm saying with the stuff that's going on right now, it
Mhm.
was busted. It was busted because the SEC was doing like an internal investigation
Right.
of
Right. Right.
of these
Where the
misappropriated
funds were
funds.
going. Right. Where the
Yeah.
funds were going.
So it's not like somebody came, like it's not like he paid a mistress and then they were like, oh no, you know what? I'm gonna break this this agreement that we had and stuff like that. So
Right.
we could tell Venkat's not sending Vince McMahon a Christmas card this year.
No.
So what so overall, Vince McMahon, good or bad for the wrestling industry?
I think bad because he got us to some highs that were great. And he changed it. No doubt, he changed the industry for a lot of good. But then look where that good ultimately ended up, where we're in this state where it's a stagnated industry. There are no real true competition. We're trying with AEW, but as of right now, there's really no true competition. So that means he can now get fat, bloated, and lazy and put out any old garbage that he wants to because he doesn't have that sense of urgency. And they're literally running the industry. They're setting the contracts and the amount of money that people can make. Whereas a person got pissed off with Vince McMahon or with WCW, they could be like, oh, forget you. I'm going somewhere else. That's what happened to Stone Cold. He got fired by Eric Bischoff. Then he went over to Vince McMahon and he got bigger and better. Undertaker left WCW, went to WWF. He became legendary. But guys don't have that opportunity anymore because you have to walk on eggshells to make it work in this one place. So that's a bad thing for wrestling. So with that, if we rewind back to those days that we just spoke about in the 80s and even beyond, you will never have those precious moments that we speak of, where you're watching Georgia Championship Wrestling, or you're watching World Class, or you're watching AWA, or whoever you're watching, because it would have only been one league, and that guy that you're watching probably wouldn't have been able to make the roster in that one league at that one time. So then nothing would have happened. And that's literally what we're living in right now. We're living in a situation where it's limited. And as much as they try, WWE, because they did the NXT thing, now, wrestling pay-per-views used to be special. So you would have 3 a year, 4 a year, or 5 a year. Now, there's a wrestling pay. Sometimes it's 2 in 1 month. So, you're having a pay-per-view monthly or more. And they're trying to get the content out, but it's not the same when it's being ran by one group. If we had other people doing it, we could have our own, parody. And we could have these great moments, but that we're not getting because of Vince McMahon and his Monopoly game that he played. So, yeah, I wish that, there was a point where he could have been stopped. I really wish someone else would have bought WCW. Eric Bischoff was trying to buy it. Other people were interested in trying to buy it, but it just didn't pan out in time. And as a result, we have this current situation where you have to hope that WWE comes through. And that's not fair to the fans. That's not fair to WWE even. Because in the past, when we were watching wrestling, right, I could turn on ESPN and I'm watching AWA or World Class.
Yeah.
I could turn on TBS. I could turn on TNT. I could turn on in the Saturday mornings. WCW would have pro wrestling on. That pro wrestling show would be on.
Hour.
Yep, they had the Power Hour on Friday nights. And WWF had primetime wrestling. They had the USA Wrestling. They had Wrestling Challenge, and they had Superstars of Wrestling. And then you had the Saturday night's main event. You had the Clash of the Champions. AWA had the Supercard show. There was all this, and then that's not even talk about when ECW was showing up, and then they were doing their thing. So now you had all these leagues with all these stars and all these matches. So if something wasn't going on well in WWF, you could go to WCW, you can go to ECW, you can go.
New Japan Pro Wrestling, there was so much. Now they're still around, but it's not the same. It's just dead. He killed wrestling from what it was. That high of the 90s is never going to happen again. And he doesn't know how to make stars. Outside of maybe John Cena and Randy Orton, and even Randy Orton, I like Randy Orton. I think he's one of my favorite wrestlers in this time period. But Randy Orton is not like Goldberg, He's great, but he's not there. Cena is whatever, he's more of an actor right now. So he doesn't really have those homegrown stars. And he was used to picking people off from other territories and then blaming WCW for, they weren't even picking people off. They came to WCW, so whatever. So I think in a nutshell, your question, is he good or is he bad? He's bad. He gave us some good times, but the end result, when you follow it through, is going to be bad. Unless something drastically happens with Triple H, which I don't know.
So my countdown clock is going off, so I'll quickly say this. First of all, you got to come back because we got to do a at least a monthly or 2 times every 2 months or every 3 months wrestling wrap up, because there were so many things we didn't get to.
I know.
Also, I don't want to go before we mention this. Please like and subscribe to the Silent Assassin YouTube page. They just posted a video, I want to say Sunday night, touching tribute to the Silent Assassin, where his mom narrated his life. Man, that was like some insane, got me all in my feelings. So you guys please check that out, the Silent Assassin YouTube. I thank you. I just thank you for doing this. So my final thoughts on Vince before I go. I gotta say that Vince McMahon is good for the wrestling industry, because again, he gave me entertainment for over 35 years. I know WCW was mixed in that and everything, and
ECW,
ECWs, things like that. We had some terrible periods, but my history with him, watching his product, has brought me nothing but enjoyment. And the fact that I'm still watching that 42, something that I started watching when I was about 5, says a lot. And I do not watch the competition, so all I watch is WWE. Vince McMahon, like any other man, has his issues. He has his hangups, but I personally think he's done more good than bad for the wrestling industry. And I will say this: all the other promoters did try to get rid of him, but they just couldn't cut it. And all you hear about is this cutthroat business. He was just a little more ruthless. And he's the one who still not anymore, but he's the one who stood the test of time. And I know, because I've been wanting this to happen forever, but the god of wrestling, Triple H, is going to turn this thing around. I wholeheartedly believe that. I know you may not like him, but I gotta have you come back, man. This was tremendous. I didn't know it was gonna go so long, but let me tell you something. I'm like a kid right now talking about all this, bringing up all these good memories, man. So we definitely got to do this again.
So I just want to say one little thing. So right now, in America, we had like 30 different meat packing or meat manufacturers, right? Like back in like the 1970s, 50s, 30s, we've had like over 30 companies. Today, it's down to 2 or 3. And the quality of meat, the quality of the food that we're getting, it's not really all there. If you had more of a variety of companies, if you had more selection, you would be able to have better products out. And I think that's kind of like what Vince McMahon is. There was a time when I'm not saying that the era of all these different promotions was the greatest for wrestling, because Vince McMahon did improve it.
as far as making wrestling more accessible. We probably wouldn't even like, me included, would probably not even like wrestling if it wasn't for him. And I have to acknowledge that. But there's a certain point where it went too far. And that's why I tilt somewhat too bad.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So again, I thank you for coming on. Like I say, man, when we did the episode for your brother, we talked about doing this, and man, I'm so glad that we finally got to do this, man. I can't wait to listen to this thing because we went down memory lane tonight.
Yep.
So I thank you, my brother, for this. It was a pleasure. And
anytime.
And before we go, I always leave you with these words of encouragement. Always seek out the truth for yourself, because if not, you'll fall victim to other people's interpretations. And with that, I say peace.
Damn right.
Okay, I heard the last part of what you said. I will tell you this. Is Chris Benoit, what he did, acceptable? No. Is what he did heinous? Yes. Is what he did unforgivable? Yes. But does every issue have underlying factors? Yes. There are people who, though, like this is great. The great American philosopher George Carlin once said, he was talking about molesters and sexual issues and things like that. And he made a joke saying, well, we could fix all these problems if we outlawed religion for a couple generations, but we'd never do anything crazy like that. See, he was saying these problems are problems, and those people need to be moved. They need to be taken out of society. But you can't act like they aren't being made because of something fucked up. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think women are out of control today, but I can't act like men aren't to blame for it. You know what I'm saying? I cannot act like the majority of men aren't, not even the majority. I can't act like men's actions in the past are not something that added to the issue. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't act like that's not real. I can't act like men didn't for years take out their frustration on women. There are men who, like, slapping a bitch used to be regular degula. You know what I'm saying? I just said slapping a bitch. You feel me? Now, I don't mean it anyway, because I say slap a nigga, same thing. Bitch a nigga, that's the same shit in our vernacular. But that shit comes from a place. You know what I'm saying? So I understand what the issue is, but just like they say when you're a child, you're allowed to complain about what your parents did until you become an adult. Then you need to go fix that shit. That's why I go at women, because society's never going to fix itself. And if it does, it's not going to happen unless we on the ground level fix ourselves. You see what I'm saying? So this is the step one, just like what Kevin's saying. This is the step one. So yeah, you can't act like what Chris Benoit, like, look at it this way. Let's say every brain in the world, right, is susceptible to do something fucked up. Every brain is susceptible to doing something fucked up. Chris Benoit's brain was susceptible to doing that. If he did not have all that trauma to it, his brain might have never made that connection. It might have never gone down that road. But you put all that, think about it. Football players, they say linemen and linebackers, it takes them a career to go fucking nuts, right? The CTE hits them after a career. You know why? Because they play one game a week. They have practice, yeah, but they're not going hard in practice anymore. They're playing one game a week. So one day a week, they go and have these car accident crashes, right? Chris Benoit was having that almost every day. His finishing move was a diving headbutt. He jumped off of the top rope and landed with his head crashing into another human body. You telling me doing that? That's a football game a day. Not even counting the clotheslines, the elbows, the slams, the brain busters. Not counting any of that shit. He had a car accident every day of his life. You think that didn't fuck with him a little bit? You think that didn't knock some neurons that shouldn't have gone the way they went, but then they did? Come on, B. And that's not counting botches. Like, botches happen and you get fucked up worse on botches. Nah, man. I'm not saying it's not his fault. I'm saying I understand. Like the great American philosopher Chris Rock said, I ain't saying he should have killed her, but I understand. No, maybe take that last part back. I meant it as a joke, but then I saw he did kill him, so shit. But still, you get my point.
Always seek out the truth for yourself. Straight Talk with Trevor, the podcast where no topic is off limits.